Good afternoon and welcome once again to TaxCalc TV, where we are looking into the glorious world of technology. With the annual January rush fast approaching, what better time to evaluate whether you are taking full advantage of the software and the systems that can make your life so much easier. I'm Andy North, the CMO here at TaxCalc, and I'm joined as ever by Dean Shepherd, who is the Director of Customer Education and Engagement here at TaxCalc, and also not one but two experts on practice technology. First off, in the studio we have David Oliver. He's the Systems Implementation Manager for the Valued Academy, which is now a formal part of Stephen Paul's Valued Group. David, do you want to tell us a little bit about the kind of work you've been doing?
Certainly, thanks Andy. So I work with practices up and down the country, helping them identify the gaps in their tech stacks and what technologies and softwares they can implement to fill those gaps.
Excellent. And secondly, we have dialing in from her home in Hull, we have TaxCalc TV veteran Billie Mcloughlin, who heads up the technology advisory arm of 2020 Innovation. Billie, what kind of projects have you been working on?
Thanks, Andy. Yes, so I've been working quite recently with our Tech Talk members, all about the roundup from Accountancy North, and also helping a few of our members with making the most of the integration on the current system. So trying not to change too much, but making sure they're getting the most out of the ones that they're currently using. And that's been my projects this month.
Brilliant. Thank you, Billie, and thank you, David. So we are well placed to tackle the subject on the table. We're going to be looking at what kind of technology that we're seeing being used in firms just like yours right now. We're going to be looking at how you can evaluate what people often refer to as your stack and find out whether you've got the gaps that you need to fill. We're also going to hear from our experts about some of the newer technologies that are changing the way firms are tackling the busiest season of the accounting year. And you might have come across this thing called AI, unless you've been living under a rock. Billie has been a major force in exploring how firms are leveraging that in some interesting ways, and she's going to share that with us today. When you registered, you would have received a link to a short survey asking about the technology that you use in your firm. Thank you so much to everyone who responded. Some really interesting trends came out of that, and we want to explore those right now. Okay, so the first question we asked was, what software do you use for receipt capture? Now, as you can see from this, 53% of the respondents, and it was around 100 people took part in this survey, 53% of people said that they have no formal software. Reactions?
Gobsmacked.
Gobsmacked,
would be the first one.
Says David.
This is probably one of the simplest, most underpinning technologies that's available to accountancy practices, and I would have honestly thought that the uptake was going to be much larger than that, but yeah, the figures speak for themselves.
It's quite something, isn't it? And I know, Billie, you were quite surprised by that figure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to echo that, it's probably the most basic implementation of software that we've seen over recent years that has made such a significant change. So in terms of the return on investment, it's probably been one of the biggest ones we've seen. So I thought it would be much, much higher in terms of software. But that's great because it means there's a lot of people that need our help.
So what do you think is driving that? Because you're right, it's quite a simple, what you might call a no-brainer. What do you think? Is it that people don't necessarily understand what it can do for them, or that they've looked at it and said, I don't see the value in it, or is there something else that's a barrier to people picking up that kind of software?
I do think people see the expense without seeing the return on investment initially. But when you've got software out there such as HubDoc, which is free for zero users, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit later on about how many zero users there are, expenses, it's not really a very good excuse because there are free options. So I think it's just education. I think people do not understand the benefit that they could see by using these systems. So what they're doing is they're just using historic attitudes, historic habits and thinking, well, that's how we've always done it. There's no need for us to change. It works. Why fix it?
So Dean, you used Receipt Bank, didn't you? Or as it was?
Yes, as it was. And actually the introduction of Receipt Bank probably created the biggest strategic change in my practice that any software has done, because I made the decision early on in my practice that I wasn't going to do any bookkeeping for for clients because the margins weren't there and I could be spending my time doing more valuable work. I think when live bank feeds came into the bookkeeping software, that opened my eyes to think, well, actually, we could do this a lot more economically now, but I still didn't change the decision. But when Receipt Bank came around and you could actually see how much more efficiently you could do the bookkeeping, I completely reversed that decision and decided, actually, I have to bring bookkeeping in-house now because it's gone from a low margin service line to a high margin one.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with Billie that actually, I think the reason it's not as broadly used as we think is because we're involved in technology day to day. We've been aware of these different solutions for a long time. That still hasn't penetrated the whole of the accountancy sector. So there are still plenty of accountants out there who are blissfully unaware of what these products can do for them.
Absolutely. So David, it would be worthwhile just getting, for those people who perhaps haven't looked into Receipt Bank, they might know of, or Dext, sorry, as a brand, and not quite appreciate what it does. Do you want to, just for the purposes for those people who might not know it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dext, and there are other receipt capture tools available on the market, but we're talking about Dext specifically here. Very simply put, it enables you to take images of receipts or bills from suppliers, and these are automatically read by OCR technology, and they are then squirted through into Xero in terms of a bill. So it removes the manual need to key in that purchase ledger information. So the process then being automated makes it very quick, very efficient, and very cost effective. So this is exactly as Billie was saying, the ROI is not to be underestimated just because you haven't seen how that works.
So if you're not using receipt capture technology, it's probably well worth taking a look and seeing, if it is something that is going to work for you. So can we go to the next slide? So we asked what bookkeeping software is most commonly used in practices. So again, that's about 100, just over 100 people took part in this, and we've got a broad mix. There are only 7% of people aren't using any formal software, so presuming they're doing something with Excel. So yeah, what do you think of that, Billie? What's your take on that? Are you surprised by any of that?
Well, there is an Excel part there that was 31%. Then you've got the no formal software at 7%. So when you think that there's the same amount of people using nothing at all as to using QuickBooks and Xero, again, I find it astonishing. The barrier to entry bookkeeping software is generally cost, I would say, always has been, probably from when we first started adopting cloud. But again, there's some great systems out there that are combating that. So Sage have offering their freemium service ready for MTD. And I think as long as we, again, educate people and let them know that these services are available without sort of coming across those barriers to entry, hopefully we'll see these numbers increase and the Excel ones decrease a bit. One thing I would say on that, though, is with the enhancements of Excel, we might actually see more and more people moving away from bookkeeping systems. It just depends on how MTD plans out, but I guess that's a conversation for another day.
I'm sure we can touch on MTD at some point. And also, I should say full marks to the person who's using Lotus 123, which I think is admirable. Excellent. So could we move to the next slide, please? So we look at these two together. So with tax, because we're TaxCalc and the majority of people here are TaxCalc users, as they should be. And then also, if we could move to the next slide after that, tax and accounts is being used by the majority of firms, and again, TaxCalc on the accounts production slide. Showing very strongly with some others in there. Very few people using no formal software for those. But I think the interesting comes from the next couple of slides. So we started looking at practice management, and this is where we started to see a significant trend that will come through, and we can look. So for the first one, we're looking at deadline management and workflow. 44% of firms not using any particular formal tools. And I should say, when you actually look at how people responded on the other column, Excel was mentioned another 8 times. So there's probably about another 10% of the people who took part in this are using no formal software. If we could slide through to the next few slides, because they all sit around this concept of practice management. So client communication and CRM, it's fairly evident there. We've got 71%. Again, a number of people using basic email tools on here, so that's even probably slightly higher. And the next slide. Client onboarding, another good 70% of people with no formal software. Can you see the trend here?
I think it's
Are you
fairly
spotting a clear
self-evident,
trend?
but yes.
So, what do you think of that, Billie? Did that surprise you?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me realize that people are making harder work of things than they need to. And there is actually a correlation. So if we go back to the very first thing we were discussing with using systems that speed up your processes, if you don't have a formal onboarding or quoting system and you're charging per the hour, it will basically not incentivize anybody to move on to a system that's going to do things quicker, because they're going to be reducing their revenue. So by using these systems, we can then move over to transactional billing. But with anything like that, practitioners, they're working in the practice. They don't have time to be setting up new systems, and they're worried about, where do we begin with these systems? Where do I start? How do I move over from spreadsheets or the back of a fag packet, however they're doing their management at the moment? How do they move over? And that is the major issue, and that's where we need to use the client success teams that these software providers have on offer, or some of the service that are out there.
So what are you guys seeing when you're out with your customers? How much of a step up are you seeing between those firms that say are not using any or many particular tools to those that are? How clear is the advantage in terms of productivity and profitability? David?
I think it's extremely visible. I think you will find, and I mean, I've been into firms that have been essentially manual processes, and they were literally running out of desks to sit people at. They had no capacity left because everybody was maxed out because of the amount of physical work they were having to put through. The only way to address that is via streamlining via technology, really. So there are so many quick wins to reduce the time that these processes take to then give you the capacity to increase, take on more clients and build your revenue. So while it might be the traditional approach because that's what they've always done, you can't grow in any way, shape or form significantly without looking at methods of streamlining like that. So to me, it makes perfect sense that that's what they do. And we have seen, as we've gone to install these systems for other practices, that they have absolutely benefited from that, and they've become more efficient, more productive, more profitable through the use of these systems.
So, Dean, your tools that you used in your practice, do you want to talk us through your stack?
Yes, it'll be a very short stack: tax, calc, and Excel. Just looking at the high numbers of people not adopting those types of practice management tools, I think trust plays a big part in that. If you've been used your whole career to seeing a spreadsheet that has all your clients, the stages of the jobs, whether you've asked for the information, whether you've got the jobs in, who's working on it, to go from that to trusting a piece of software to monitor those deadlines, to trust all your staff to enter the information in the right way so that system has the correct information to report that information to you. I think that's quite a big leap of faith. So it doesn't surprise me that adoption of those kind of tools has been slow, because knowing clients' deadlines is so fundamental to what you deliver, and so high risk if something goes wrong. that I think people are hesitant to move away from something that's so familiar to them from the very first day they start in accountancy, the humble spreadsheet.
So it's a kind of better the devil you know for a lot of firms that have been brought up in a certain way. They don't want to let go of those systems, even though they may be less efficient.
Yeah, and I think a lot of systems actually feel a little bit like all or nothing, because all these practice management tools have so much variety of functionality within them that you want to maximise your use of them because they are a big investment. Whereas sometimes I think if you just moved things over incrementally, built trust in one element at a time, then perhaps actually that would be an easier way in for many people.
Excellent, good point. And I mean, I think we've talked about this extensively before, which is about this notion of, we talk about practice management, and in the sense of here, we're talking about communications, we're talking about workflow management, we're talking about document management, we're also talking about time and fees, that there are so many different tools available that do so fundamentally different things, that it's really important that you do some introspection before you actually go and invest, and that's something that I know you're going to be talking about shortly. So we'll come on to that. So Billie, are you seeing that people are the firms that you're working with? I mean, are they fully aware of the kind of functions that these different technologies actually do, or are they? Well, how are they responding to the growth in the different practice management tools that are out there?
It's just completely overwhelming, if I'm honest. I think that is the biggest challenge we're seeing. There's so many options out there, and the way I visualize it is a bit like a Venn diagram where you've got all these different systems and they overlap in so many different ways that you almost have to pick which functionality you want from one but not from another. But going back to your previous question, the ones that we are seeing really run with this and take the time out to do it, we're seeing a really great team morale as well. So these people are not taking their team for granted, and with the talent shortage that the industry is facing, making sure that your team are not doing repetitive, onerous, basic tasks like inputting invoices, and making sure that they've got comfortable ways of working. So when I was in practice, I was sort of in charge of the digital strategy, and the difference in team morale from when we used manual systems to once everything was up and running was vast. It was such a different team. And I wish we could bottle it up and show people this is what it would look like later on, but it's getting that visualization. I think people are aware of it, but they just struggle to visualize it with every other pressing matter that's going on in the practice at the moment. Interesting.
So it's kind of it's an investment which may help with your recruitment and retention. I've not considered it in that light before. So yeah, very interesting point. Thank you, Billie. Okay, so I think from this the message might well be that yeah, it's probably worth investing in tools that you can manage your practice with, but don't do so without thinking about it first. And I think we've all seen firms that have perhaps overinvested and overblown what they need and what they don't need. So yeah, time for some introspection. Okay, so moving on, we wanted to talk about how a firm can, and to our viewers who are watching, what they can do to kind of do their own analysis. What kind of structures do you recommend that the owner of an accounting firm can apply so that they can see where they're missing, where their gaps are, and where they may or may not need to fill them?
Certainly. So I think the same basic principles apply to any firm of any scale, really, is that it's breaking down the processes that you undertake on a daily basis, looking at how you perform those, and then seeing which of those are your big time sinks. So for example, if you're looking at bookkeeping, are you doing a manual process? Could you therefore save time by automating that process? The same is true for any aspect of running your practice. So if it was deadline management, if it was simple workflow, whatever it be, you can absolutely start to look at your practice as a series of functions in that sense. And all we want to do is then to essentially prioritise which of those you want to address first. It is tempting to fix everything all in one go. That is not necessarily the best approach unless there's a very simple and straightforward way to do so. However, if it is the case that there is one glaring area of your process that you know if you can fix that, then it's going to make an instant return on your investment, then that would be the suggestion, is that you essentially fix that big problem first before then moving on to look at the other areas within your practice. So yeah, I would normally suggest as an approach, perhaps nominate a champion as such, so that they can then start to analyse that process. I wouldn't necessarily say that has to be the MD or anybody like that, possibly slightly too close to the process, but somebody of a significant capacity who can, dedicate the right amount of time to this. And once they've then had the opportunity to work through those practice processes, to then feed back on that, and if necessary, bring in somebody who can advise and assist on what options are available to them in terms of putting a remedy in place. Because it is exactly as Billie said, this is quite the minefield. There's so many different options open to a practice as to what they can use to fix this problem that it's not always clear. So a little bit of outside assistance to say, well, these are which ones will be better for you in certain circumstances. Yeah, that will definitely pay dividends.
And of course, and you can go to Billie or David. Billie, you'd need to be a 2020 member to benefit from Billie's advice, but they certainly help you. But other people are out there who can help you. So are you're suggesting really creating a kind of chart and
yeah.
Here are my processes. This is how important they are. This is how I don't have any technology for this, but this takes up 30% of my time. And building that, go down to that sort of level of...
Absolutely. I mean, this can sometimes come down to a whiteboard and a pen and literally just mapping out, this is what we do. Yeah. It might sound ridiculously basic, but it's true. Until you've actually seen these are the processes and this is what they look like, you can't then begin to identify where those stopgaps or bottlenecks are. So it's a valuable process.
Did you go through that, Dean, in your firm? Did you kind of think very holistically about software, or were you more just fixing problems as you saw them?
I always worry when you ask me questions, Andy, because it feels like I've then got to tell you what I did and think that's what I'm proposing people should do.
No.
So no, I never had a technology strategy or even a kind of systems and processing strategy. I always started with, what's the biggest problem I'm facing in my practice? What are the things that annoy me on a daily basis? And the things that are most annoying are the things that bubble to the surface. And I think, okay, well, I need to resolve that somehow. Despite what you think, I was quite forward thinking in terms of technology. So I'd always be looking for a technology solution if such a thing existed. But I think for most of the time is what are those problems that are bubbling to the surface? How do I find a solution to them? If there's a technology solution, happy days, let's go that route.
Right. Okay, so yes, there's a lot of ways to attack this, but it's worthwhile putting some time in to explore what opportunities that you've got available. On that note, we did want to talk about some of the technology that you guys are all seeing out there, and there is some stuff that perhaps might not be tailor-made for accountants that people are using. So Billie, what's your take on that? Have you seen anything particularly interesting of late?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 3 systems that I recommend to pretty much any practitioner, which are not related to accountancy at all. And then the other bits, I'll probably touch on when I talk about the AI and what's coming later on. But the 3 systems that we're seeing sort of significant time savings and people liking to adopt, they're easy to adopt. I timed myself setting up an account the other day. It took me 4 minutes. So these systems are not difficult. There's not a lot of training required, etc. So the first is Calendly, which is super easy for scheduling appointments. You can just attach a link into your email footer and people can put time in your diary. They cannot access your diary. They cannot see it, but they can put time in where there is availability. And you can also choose how long those meetings are. So if you want to just send a 30-minute one for a discovery for a new client or a 2-hour one for a year-end meeting, it's totally up to you. Microsoft do have their own version of this called Booking, but weirdly that doesn't link into Outlook, but Calendly does, even though Booking is owned by Microsoft 365, which is odd. So I would definitely check that out if you're not using that already. The second one is Fireflies. So I use this in all of my meetings, and this automatically joins a meeting for you. So whether you're using Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, whatever it may be, it will join the meeting for you and it will transcribe it. And the major benefit of this and why it's so important in practice is that you can search for keywords throughout your discussions. So the amount of times I would sit with a client and discuss certain things and then get back to my desk, I'd have an inbox full, and the next day I'd have to remember what we discussed and decipher my hieroglyphic notes that made no sense. This does it for you. So I can just search keywords and say, right, okay, what did they say about that new tractor they'd bought? Have a quick search and it would give me the information. So there's loads of different reports you can run off that, so you can sort of see the tone of a meeting, see if it was negative or positive. And you can also get sound bites out of it, so you can snip bits and send it onto your team. So that's really, really great.
So sorry, just to be clear, that's called Firefly.
Fireflies.ai, yeah.
.ai, and that, so is that just kind of a bolt-on to a browser, or?
So it's just, you would log in through your Internet Explorer, and you just log into your email through the Internet Explorer, and it knows whatever's in your calendar. It will just automatically join those meetings, and it usually gets there a couple of minutes early, so it makes you look late.
Yeah, we've had that.
So that's really good. There are other options out there. So there's one called Otter. There's one called it's something Meet. But they're very sales based. So although they do something Meet Record, it's called. Sorry, they're very sales based. So for our industry, I just think it's a bit of an overkill. So that's why I would recommend Fireflies. And then the third one that I just wanted to touch on is called Scribe. So talking about that team morale, the hybrid working model that we all seem to have. So if you've got team members that are all over, we really lack that training sort of ethos that we had created. So when I was training, that I could just ask somebody how to run a journal, or how did you post this, wages, whatever it may be. We can now really easy screen record. So back in the day, I used to do it on PowerPoint. So if someone asked me a question on QuickBooks, I used to go into PowerPoint, do a screen record, send it on, and it was really clunky. The benefit of Scribe is not only is it a screen recorder, it has AI built into it so that it will know where you've clicked on the screen and automatically document the process that you've done. So you could use this whether it's showing clients how to do things, team members, or even if you want to document internal processes for new starters. It's got that capability, and it also claims to, and from what I've seen so far, it does eradicate any confidential information that you maybe don't want to pass on to other people. So Calendly, Fireflies, and Scribe would be the three non-accounting software that all accountants need to use.
Wonderful, thank you, Billie. It's like tomorrow's world all over again, but just for accountants. Excellent. David, have you seen anything particular? What are you seeing people picking up that's interested you?
So, I mean, there's a few things out there. I think the one that's sort of engaged me recently, there was ID Inform, I think it was, which is giving you the ability to automatically file things like confirmation statements without actually ever touching them. So, again, automations like that are just saving time. So anything of that nature I always find fascinating, because it's where practices can win very easily and very quickly.
Excellent. Dean? New toys?
I've stumbled across a great little product called Tax Account Communications Centre.
Communication Centre, I've heard of that.
Gets me really excited at the moment. I kind of feel it takes, we were discussing earlier a particular product that I used from many moons ago, that we're not entirely sure whether it still exists or not, but the website's certainly still there. And that piece of software I used to basically create my paperless office.
Yeah.
But I think actually the one thing that it didn't do was really generate any communications automatically with my clients. I was still, all the templates were there. They're all customizable, and it meant that every member of my team communicated with my clients in exactly the same way. So it had that consistency. but none of it was automatic. We still had to generate them one by one for every single client. So I'm genuinely excited about the direction we're going, Communication Centre, and automatically generating all those items of communication.
So if you're not familiar with Communication Centre, it essentially allows you to bolt on to the TaxCalc database, so you've got the full details of all of your clients and some of the information that's coming out of their tax returns, which you can then integrate. You can schedule bulk email to communicate with your clients, to do client reminders, to tell them how much they've paid on account, for example. All automated and within the TaxCalc brand. So that's Communication Centre. It's well worth a look. Awesome. So, AI. Billie, what is AI? I've never heard of
it. You must be one of those people living under a rock. So AI just seems to have consumed my world of work, and to be honest, my personal life as well at the moment. It's just mind blowing what is capable of doing. We've seen a lot of people who are very cynical about it, understandably, because is it just another fad? Does it actually do anything? We're seeing things wrong. So for those that don't know, AI is artificial intelligence, and it's basically where machines can do tasks that humans traditionally would do. And the most popular one, and the one that gets the most traction, is ChatGPT. And this is a large language model, which means that it's being taught on hundreds of millions of articles, books, web pages, and everything else to have a conversation. So you can ask it a question and it will conversate back with you. The benefit of ChatGPT is that it speaks to you like a human. And if you've ever been on Ryanair's chat or anything like that, you'll understand how annoying it is to speak to a robot. Well, ChatGPT changes that. It's actually quite hard to tell that you are speaking to a machine. You'll probably think you're speaking to a human. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. The great thing about this is that we can then develop this into chatbots for our practice. And we actually have a member who's doing this at the moment, and it's incredible. He's created 3 chatbots. And it means that whenever anybody gets asked a question within his practice, he gets the answer and he puts it into this machine. And then going forward, what happens is if anybody has a question, they put it in there, ask it, and it will return it because they've been asked it before. And this can be anything. So the 3 chatbots he's got is, one is for the team. So it can be great for new starters who have got questions about, I don't know, expenses, parking, do I have to pay for tea and coffee? All the basic questions. Then you've got one for clients, which might be, how do I find my UTR number? And then you've got one which is for software. So as you know, as accountants, we seem to have stepped into the world of software support as well. And it can answer questions like, how do I post an invoice on Xero, etc. So he's created these 3 chatbots for his practice, which is so impressive. And ChatGPT has allowed him to do that. You'll also see the main competitor to ChatGPT is Google Bard. So the benefit of that is that it's actually connected to the internet. ChatGPT is accurate up until about September 21, I think it is now. Whereas Google Bard, if you ask it a question, it will pull something down from the internet almost instantaneously. And you can almost see it thinking for you as well, and then it will just pop up the answer in one go. It's great. One thing I would say is they can't produce tax returns as much as you might see it online. I think the latest ChatGPT release said that they could produce tax returns. If it's not up to date with the latest tax legislation, then it's not going to produce accurate tax returns, is what I would say. But the ChatGPT does have some great plugins, so that's something that I kind of wanted to cover. The plugins that we can use on ChatGPT means that basically they're bolt-ons to connect it to the internet, and then we can use that for asking it questions and get more accurate answers. You can use plugins. There's one called Ask My PDF. So you would throw a PDF in there and then ask it a question and it could read it, which is great for any sort of legislation that we get from the revenue. It could be 80 pages and we want to just ask it a question, throw it in there, ask it a question. It's going to do that for us. The other ones are Video Insights and Link Reader. So those 3 are great add-ins if you're using ChatGPT 4 to basically save you time on doing the research. So that's a bit on like ChatGPT and Google Bard. What I would say is they have hallucinations. If you don't know what those are basically where it spits out an answer and it seems correct, but actually it's completely rubbish. It's a little bit like a keen intern that will just give you an answer just because it thinks you want one, but it's not right. So we need to look out for hallucinations. We also need to be careful on security. So please don't begin to throw client data in there, because we're still not 100% sure who's getting this information, and it can regurgitate that to somebody else. So the idea with these AI systems is they're continuously learning, and we want to make sure that we're not teaching it client data that it's then going to spit out to somebody else. So it's always good to be aware of these things. And then because of this and because of these incredible developments, we're now seeing this within some of our accounting systems. So QuickBooks, for example, I think they have 700 patents now filed just in the AI space, which is so impressive. And it's really great to see what these organizations are doing to save accountants time and produce some really, really great insights. Carbon and Pixie, which are two practice management systems, they now have it in there, and it will do things like categorize your inbox for you. So if a client needs to pay their tax that day and they're sending you an urgent email, it will pop it to the top of your list. If it's just a reminder for a meeting, it'll pump it down to the bottom. So it's a really great way of just doing those tasks that realistically we did not get into the profession to do. I didn't get into accountancy to categorize the 700 emails that I never thought I would get when I was an accountant, but it just seems to spill over. So it's great to see this happening. And the other thing that they're doing, so the Pixie is going to be able to link in with the likes of Xero and QuickBooks. And if you get a message from a client that says, please could I have a balance sheet, it will go into Xero, pull down the balance sheet, draft an email, and sit it there waiting, ready for you to send. So it doesn't actually do it for you. I think that time will come, but it sits there ready so you can just do a sense check and send it on. So if you just think about how much time that's going to save, it's incredible. But, and I don't like to be negative, realistically, and Dean, you might vouch for me here, when it came to doing bookkeeping, if somebody said, can I have a balance sheet, what would be the chances that would be up to date right now? Probably very slim. So this is the time to be getting our ducks in a row, getting our systems up to date, so that when these incredible AI systems become part of day-to-day life, we are able to use them to the best of our ability and take full advantage of them.
Thank you, Billy. So what you're saying is that the AI where we are now doesn't sound like it's materially getting involved in doing any of the work. We're talking really about tax season coming up, so individual tax returns that are coming up. AI isn't really doing any of the work, but what are the, it sounds more it's about the communication stuff. So what would someone who might be watching this webinar who's not capable of creating their own bot, but just is capable of using ChatGPT, what could they, what couple of things could they be doing this tax season that they couldn't have done last tax season?
Yeah, of course. As long as you anonymize the data, you can put figures into it. So I did something the other day where I had a really messy bank rec, and I just threw it in there and I said, please could you tidy this up into these 4 headings? And it created a table for me to then put into Excel. I also asked it if it could search for any anomalies and said, is there any data that looks inconsistent? And I tested a few things, and I'd put in a date that was 4 years in the future, and it spat out and said, this date looks incorrect. I also asked it to add up all of the mileage, all of the petrol. It could do things like that, which was great. And also I asked it to write a letter recently to the revenue about, so I just said, look, this is, I think it was about a stamp duty rebate or something. This client needs a stamp duty rebate. This is the address. This is when they moved in. Could you write me a letter? And it wrote me a letter in 15 seconds. And it took me probably 30 seconds to put what I needed it to do. So to ask the question. So you're talking less than a minute for it to produce a letter to the revenue. And
did they get their rebate?
Well, I'm just testing everything at the moment.
Because that's the acid
anyway,
test.
It's also, if I'd have written to the revenue maybe 6 months ago, we might know by now, but
yeah,
it takes a while. And then what you can do is you can also put in previous letters that your practice has written to your clients. and then say, we want to write a letter to our clients that says X, Y, and Z, but could you make sure it's in the same tone of voice as these previous ones? So it almost does act as that apprentice within your practice, which is great. So using it for things such as marketing, idea generation is great. So if you are about to have a meeting with a client and it's the end of tax season and it's someone that works in the construction sector, you could say to it, what type of questions will my client ask me about tax in the construction sector? And then when you go into that meeting, you're already armed with those potential questions. And yes, okay, as accountants, we could probably come up with those, but it saves that brain power, and you'd be astonished at how it does come up with things where you think, oh, actually, yeah, that is a good idea. So, doing that idea generation is great. And you can ask it for the technical questions, but I probably would hang fire with that, just for the time being, because I'm not sure how accurate it is. And then probably the final thing, just to throw out there, because it's important that people are aware, Microsoft 365 launched Copilot yesterday, and this is their version of AI within their system. And the idea is that you can use their systems in an easy to use way. So for example, when you're in Excel, you could quite easily say, please highlight the top 10 values, or please create me another column that shows me the gross profit margin. And it will do it for you in real language. You don't need to do formula, you don't need to be able to write in code. You can speak to it in a normal text language and it will produce that information for you. Similar in Word and Outlook, it's put it into there as well. So that within Word and Outlook, you can say to it, please, could you rewrite this in a more formal way or in a friendly way? And it will do that for you.
Wow, and that's called?
So it's Microsoft Copilot, it's called. It's a term that they've coined, but if you actually look, Pixie's AI is also called Copilot. So I think it's a term that we might see more of.
Right. So it's going to be fascinating what we talk about this time next year, when things may be much different, and we can see things that are coming through where AI may be doing the tax returns for us. Thank you for that, Billie. So finally, we just wanted to hear from David, who's got some advice, because obviously if you are looking at new systems, you are looking at new software, even if you're basically on your own, there are things that you're going to need to take into account outside of the technology itself. So what are you seeing with firms that are adopting new tech, new processes? What pitfalls do they need to avoid?
I think probably one of the largest ones is just openness, communication. It's all well and good understanding that you've got a process that you want to fix and use a piece of technology to do that. But if you're not communicating thoroughly with your team, then you're going to end up meeting a lot of resistance to that. It may be that they're perfectly okay with it, but if you're not sharing that process with them, they will naturally hold back from that. So I would always encourage that you involve them, at least from an update point of view, on a very regular basis. Make sure that they're aware what's happening, what you're planning, what impact this will have. Help them understand how easy the transition will be and what the benefit will be of that. So that's certainly one aspect of it. I think other than that, it's looking very much at and we mentioned it before, fixing one problem at a time. So I would almost draw up a list of priorities. So once we've gone through that mapping exercise of understanding what your processes are, as I said, get in line the order in which you want to address these. And don't be afraid to look at the market for particular solutions. If you have listed out the top 10 needs that you've got, so for example, if we're talking practice management tool, then it needs to do X, Y, and Z, then you've given yourself a fair set of criteria to match against a piece of software out there. Do be aware of which of those elements, from your perspective, are critical though. There might be a tool that does 9 out of 10 things for you, but if that 10th thing is the one thing that you absolutely must solve, then the rest of them don't really matter. If that piece of software doesn't do that last thing, it's not going to be a good fit for you. So don't listen too much to the sales pitches that you will hear. Trust your own judgment, keep to your list of priorities, and if it doesn't fit, move to the next one. But yeah, try not to get too hung up on the detail of it. If you dig too far into these websites or listen too much to the sales pitches, it can become very confusing, and it really isn't. It is a simple matter of understanding, does this product do this, this, and this? If it does, fine. And you can matrix this as well. So you can easily come up with a spreadsheet, if you wish, saying, well, this product does this, this, and this. The next product does that, that, and that. And you'll soon get a picture of which is going to be the most appropriate tool for you. If you need some assistance, they will often have their own customer success team who you'll be able to reach out to, and they'll give you some advice once you've obviously made that decision. Alternatively, there are third parties out there who can help you and who can make that process much more streamlined and less painful. Don't underestimate the amount of time that something like this can take. So a lot of people think, yeah, flick a switch and I'll have this in place and it'll be all good and on we'll go with the job. No. This can be quite a protracted process. So don't be afraid of that, but be prepared for that. In that if it takes 6 months to decide on which is the right package and then work through that implementation process, budget for that. It's going to take some of your time, probably more of your time if you're doing it internally without external help and assistance. If it is financially sensible to bring somebody in, because that will commute that process or allow you to do your job and earn your money the way you are supposed to earn your money rather than being a software implementer, then think about that. Is it better to do it that way? Or don't be afraid, if you have got the time available, to commit to doing it yourself and making sure that you are doing it the right way and in the right stages. If you rush it, you will make a mess of it, but that's the same of anything that we put in place. So yeah, don't stint on it. Just make sure that you've given it serious and proper consideration.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So what you're saying is, first of all, make sure you take your team with you.
Yeah.
Tell them where you're going.
Absolutely.
Get them to buy in. And I think the other point is really key. It's not necessarily overly complex.
Yeah.
If you go to look at 5 bits of software, as long as you know that the piece that you pick does the things that you set out at the beginning, don't get distracted by all the other things that it can do.
Absolutely right.
Excellent. Well, wise words. Thank you very much. Dean, I don't know if you've got anything to add to your history of buying software.
I was just thinking while David was speaking that I should perhaps have taken some advice whilst I was doing all that procurement for software, because in my practice, every decision I made, every piece of software I evaluated on my own, every piece of software I became the power user of it. And I think that actually slowed down a lot of the development of my practice, because I felt like everything had to be on my shoulders. So I'd absolutely encourage getting your team with you to take that burden from you every step of the process, and external help as well. Because I only knew the software products that the limited number of people I spoke to would tell me about. I certainly didn't have a wider awareness of the market, or even knowing from experience which of those tools are better suited for the type of practice that I had, and some external assistance for that would certainly have helped.
So thank you very much. We have come to the end of today's session. Thank you very, very much for joining us. A lot of information there. Thank you very much to Billie up there in Hull. Thank you very much for David for coming down to see us. And thank you very much, Dean. I hope you found that really, really useful. I found it fascinating. It's going to be interesting, like I say, to see what happens this time next year and what kind of technology we're going to be talking about. We're back on the 4th of October, where we have got a fascinating webinar where we are looking at the AML inspector. What does the inspector see when he comes into your practice? That's hugely busy. We've had 1,700 people sign up for that already, so very excited for the 4th of October. Hopefully you can join us then. Otherwise, until next time, bye-bye.